Right. Good morning. We are here on a chilly winter's morning on the Wednesday, the 3rd of July. I've got with me none other than Jack Mutlante. Good morning, morning. How are you, Jack?
Good morning. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Sterk. Uzoba strong.
You must just.
No, for sure. Sure. Well, there's lots to get into today. I mean, it's funny. We've got Nickolaus Bauer, the author of this book, a former reporter on TV News, popping by a little bit later on, talk about Johannesburg. And Gauteng can't seem to get a provincial government together because the ANC and the DA are bickering over who deserves how many posts. And this is to be expected. And it's amazing how many people are like involved, like they're really, really involved. So I ended up watching a little bit of this unfold last night. And sometimes I think that politicians, instead of helping things move along so that ordinary people like us can get on with our lives, I sometimes feel, unironically, that they are a hindrance to our happiness.
Yep.
That it would almost be better if we lived in a complete anarchy.
The fact of the matter is they don't live our lives. They don't live the way we do. They couldn't be bothered. And right now, I imagine there's a lot of ego, a lot of struggle comparisons. You know what I mean?
Big time.
My record as a struggle veteran.
Oh yeah, that's coming into it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it has to. It has
definitely.
To. And then there's the white monopoly capital floating around somewhere in the background.
Well, the funniest thing is, right, I saw there's a huge amount of uproar and outrage this morning. Again, you really should not be able to operate heavy machinery unless you have a license to operate that machinery. It's like you need a gun license to operate a gun.
Yeah.
And if you're going to use English on the internet, you need to have a basic comprehension test. I see people this morning, I don't know if you've noticed this, and it bears some reflection. People like Floyd Shivambu, Dalimpofu, the usual suspects. I mean, Dalimpofu, who once taught me about the definition of hate speech. I'd like to take the opportunity, Dali, to teach you about figures of speech. I'd like to teach you a little bit about irony, satire, sarcasm, metaphors, similes, kind of stuff that I think we did in halfway through high school. We did that stuff. For example, the reason they're all flustered this morning, and I think they're probably just looking for reasons. I think this is like that they're self-consciously frauds. In other words, that they know it's nonsense, but they need to hype up people even dumber than them. So Helen Ziller, in her talk yesterday with, her and like the provincial leadership of the DA in Gauteng, Salim Simanga, they were busy sitting there talking about how they won't upset the balance of power in KZN because they're unhappy about what's going on in Gauteng. So they won't, the term she used was, she said they won't let the province go to the dogs. And now Dali and Floyd and a whole lot of other people are like, they called us dogs. Like, guys, it's a figure of speech. Saying you're letting something go to the dogs is a well-known. This is not some arcane thing like let's slip the dogs of war. To use another dog example, or Dog Day. The dog days are here.
Yeah, every dog has its day.
Every dog has its day. Every time you refer to a dog, it doesn't mean you are literally comparing people to dogs. And I can't believe I even have to sit here and explain, like, this is basic high school English comprehension. Yeah. And if you don't get it, you're never going to get it. And I don't think you should be allowed to operate the internet on your phone if you don't have these skills, because it's just going to create a world. Clearly, these people are in pain. They're in pain. They think they're being compared to dogs, which is absolutely not what's happened. And I hope against hope that they are actually self-conscious frauds, that they're deliberately being deceitful and misleading.
I think they are.
But if they're not, then they must eventually get the pain that comes to them for just being dumb.
No, I actually don't think they're being dumb in this instance. They've been dumb about a couple of other things, but they're not being dumb in this instance. I think it's playing off the idea that, apartheid 2.0 is on the way.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to feed that narrative if you want it to work. And I think that's what I suspect they're doing. I'm hoping they're not that dumb. I genuinely hope so.
All right, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah, 10 with 10.
So in case you don't know what was going on yesterday, apparently the ANC in Gauteng, what they did is there are 11 posts altogether, right? There's the premier, which obviously goes to the ANC. They're the biggest party in Gauteng, but not by a lot, right? There's a small difference between the size of the ANC and the size of the DA in the province. So it's close. Anyway, the ANC under Panyaza Lesufi, who would be the premier, said, besides the premier, which we'll take, thank you very much, rightly so, there are 10 other positions. So they offered the DA 3.
Okay.
They're like, you get 3. And the DA is like, well, what happened to proportionality? Because if we're only a couple of seats less than you in the executive, in the provincial legislature, surely we should have, and according to Helen, her calculation is like 4.5 or 4.6 or 4.7. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
But she's like, we'll be happy to round that down to 4. Then you guys take 6. And what we'll do is we can both give up a seat to one of the smaller parties. But if we give up more than one seat between the two of us, then it's no longer proportional. Then we're not respecting the rights of and the decision of the voters in Gauteng. Right? So the people in Gauteng have deliberately given a poisoned chalice to the ANC and DA. They're like, you've got to work together. This is what we want as the people of this province. We're like, we want a little bit of this and we want a little bit of that. And we want some sprinkling of this as well. That's the recipe we've chosen. So she's right. But now Panyaza was like, nah, we'll give them 3. We'll take 7 and we'll just quietly pretend nothing's going wrong. And I think they might have overplayed their hand because, like apparently Fikile Mbalula has been called in and like now they're reporting Panyaza to the headmaster. So I don't know. I mean, in Gauteng, we haven't had a government for the last 5 or 6 years anyway.
Yeah, we really haven't.
So, like, do I look worried? I mean, I'm so used to potholes.
Yeah.
I've got like my tires know when those potholes are coming now.
Yeah, and Joburg CBD is making its full change to South Africa's trash can. So
it is. In fact, the entire province of Gauteng is just one big trash heap.
Hey,
I've
look,
driven all the way.
Dogs.
It's go. Ooh. You said we had dogs. See,
it's going to the woof woofs.
This is the stupidity of what we're dealing with. So, suppose you get what we pay for, right?
Yes, sir.
And by the way, rates are going up as well. Rates are going up. Electricity's going up. Rubbish removal, water, all of that stuff's going up. But we're getting less for our money.
Yep.
So. Lovely government.
And that whole 200 Rand extra that we have to pay if you're using prepaid electricity. Yep. Good luck with that. Yeah.
Wasn't it a GNU that killed Mufasa, says Slippery Pickle. Never forgot. Yeah. I think it was. It was wildebeest. That's a GNU. All right. So that's the politics done and dusted for the morning. I don't have the appetite to talk about very much more than that. I'm sure you don't either.
No, they're boring now.
What's happening with you? What's keeping you busy these days?
Hey, I keep coming across these crazy documentaries on Netflix. It's madness, bro. I don't know what's going on.
You told us about the siblings that all had schizophrenia the other day.
Yeah. So,
I think you should stop watching these crazy shows. I think that might be part of the problem.
Do you know what, Gareth? I'm learning empathy. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out if I've got feelings or not.
All right, go on.
So this guy, it starts off with this guy, and he's making his way to college, right? As he's walking onto the campus, there's random people greeting him. Yo, how you doing? I thought you weren't coming back. All of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it goes like completely against the person that he is. He's not really that popular. He's just a random dude.
Right.
Finally makes his way to the dorm. Some dude knocks on his door and he turns around and the guy says, yo, Eddie, I didn't think you were coming back. And the guy's like, I'm not Eddie. What are you talking about? So they both run. This is in the 80s, by the way. So they both run to...
This is true story.
True story.
Okay.
So they run to a telephone booth. For the kids in there, it's where we used to make phone calls back in the day. Anyway, so...
Gotta explain.
Yeah, they call the Eddie. And this Eddie guy says, yeah, no, I'm home. and they drive to Eddie's house. When they get there, Eddie is basically a mirror image of this other guy. His name is Alan, who was starting college at the time. And it turns out they were twins separated at birth. Naturally, the story makes the news. When the news story comes out, the third twin finds the newspaper and then calls the newspaper to say, hey, there's 3 of them.
So they're triplets.
They're triplets, separated at birth. And by that point in time, they were 19 when they found each other. And then it goes into this whole rabbit hole where you find out that the adoption agency that placed them did so as a way to kick off their study. They were trying to figure out. Okay,
so they were the government.
Yeah.
Or some institution decided what we'll do is we'll track these 3, put them in different families, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different amounts of resources, different school areas, different parents, obviously, and then we'll see whether it's nature or nurture.
That's exactly it.
But they found each other.
They found each other.
Against all odds.
Yep. And it turns out there were multiple sets of twins that this was done to.
Right.
And it all ended the same way for all of them. They developed mental health issues at some point, the separation anxiety, because, I mean, you're born all together. And for a while, you're put together. You know that you have this human being that's the same size as you, kind of looks as the same as you.
Yeah.
And
it's like meeting your clone.
It's crazy.
How would that feel?
It is insane.
Bitcoin Bot says, I know what Jack's talking about. Didn't one of them commit self-annihilation?
Yes, sir.
So one of them killed himself?
Yep.
Oh, boy.
Yep.
Okay, well, how did that one grow up? Because we should avoid that.
Funny, interestingly enough, he grew up in the most well-off family.
So, well, what does that mean for privilege?
It means what it's always meant. It actually means fuck all, because it depends
life's unfair. Right.
It actually depends on the character that you build within yourself, really. It's got nothing to do with how you were raised and all of this stuff. Like, it's so shocking to me that we still hear stories of people who grew up in the worst circumstances who ultimately make something of themselves.
Well, it's a lot like this very stupid argument that's going on social media at the moment too, around the qualifications of our politicians and our ministers. I mean, like, for example, it seems to really burn some people that some members of parliament and ministers have just a matric.
Okay.
But these same people will tell us you shouldn't discriminate against someone just because they have a matric.
Yeah, it's a success story. Come on.
Most of the most brilliant people I know only have a matric. Really, I personally know very few exemplary, extraordinary, huge, monstrous successes that are university graduates. And I know I'm not knocking education, and I'm certainly not saying that all our universities are a disaster, but a lot of them are close. And a lot of them are just churning out a bunch of very ordinary and overqualified people who have no streetwise abilities.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes we forget that the guy who's selling stuff on the street, you know, the guy who's got like a spaza shop, the woman who's doing looking after other people's children for money, for example. We think those people, because they're unqualified, must also be unintelligent. And that's a completely wrong way to approach these things. So I don't think that it matters. And similarly, I think that if you grew up privileged, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have a better life.
No.
There are plenty of poor people who are much more exemplary than a lot of the rich people I know. In fact, a lot of the rich people I know think they can get away with things and will try to, and they think the law doesn't apply to them, and they think that the world is very unfair and they're very entitled. And the poor people I know, well, the poorer people I know, tend to think that everything that happens to them, they've either earned or deserved. And I would rather go with the latter philosophy, because if you sit around blaming other people, and I had the fortune yesterday of talking to Robin Sharma, who's, of course, one of the world's most incredible gurus. He's helping people to optimize themselves at every opportunity. He's written a ton of books. He's the guy who wrote that brilliant Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
He's just recently finished a new book called The 8 Forms of Wealth, which is, I might have got that title slightly wrong. But
The 8 Forms of Wealth That Money Can't Buy.
There we go. Thank you. Basically, and I made notes the whole way through my interview with him yesterday. You'll be able to watch it next week, I think. He says the same thing. So this is very much on my mind at the moment. And it was really, really cool talking to him. So we'll share that with you as it comes up. Either way, up you get. Let's go. Let's rise and shine. We have much to discuss. And if you think your life is boring, who knows? You might have a twin somewhere.
Yeah, you might.
That you didn't even know about.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine that?
That would blow my mind. It would be absolutely mind-blowing. You
think it's just me. I'm an only child. You find out you have not only one, but 2 carbon copies of yourself walking around somewhere.
Sure.
I mean, for everybody to have called him Eddie, he must have looked exactly like him.
Exactly like him. Exactly. Sure. I mean, and the entire story wasn't all doom and gloom. I mean, they ran a successful restaurant. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They partied it up. All 3 of them got married. They've got kids.
Right.
So it wasn't all bad. And I think in 2024, for whatever reason, we speak in totalities. Like it's no, that person is fucked up. It's like, no, what they did was fucked up. Like we don't have to label an entire person's life over one thing that they did, right? In a similar way to how you were pointing out these politicians that only have matric. It's like, okay, sure. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that person couldn't make it into university. Isn't it impressive that they still made something of their lives to the point that they are part of the government?
Well, that's more impressive.
It's more impressive
than if you were just given everything,
I mean, so it's weird.
I love the story. I don't know if I'll watch the documentary, but I love the story. And again, there's this ongoing debate about nature and nurture.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you have no say, like you don't have a say about at least half, probably more than half, but let's say at least half of who you are. It's got nothing to do with you.
Yep.
Like just for a minute, think about the stuff that upsets you on a day-to-day basis. I'm not athletic. I want blue eyes instead of brown eyes. I'd like my hair to be like this.
I'd like to be taller.
I like to be a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good. I would call her. Had a rabbit in the hat. But anyway, whatever it is that you want or that you think you want for yourself, and the things you're proud of.
Yeah.
Like the things that you go, I'm proud of me because I look in the mirror and I think I'm good looking. That's not you, by the way. That's just absolutely accidental fuckings through history at precisely the right time.
Yep.
Your whiteness, your blackness, your tallness, your shortness, your
thickness, your thinness.
All of that stuff it's not you. You had nothing to do with it. So to be proud of it or to hate yourself for it is dumb.
Yeah.
Those are nature things, not nurture things.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we've more or less figured out the genome, we've now got, you can go and have these things done now, and it's easy to do it because, thank God, computing power has gone up in leaps and bounds since Francis and Crick eventually deciphered DNA. But even so, you can go and have your entire genome written out for you. You can have the entire sequence of genes in every one of your chromosomes laid out like a roadmap before you still won't understand all of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's still going to be junk DNA and certain things that switch on and off that we don't understand yet, that produce proteins and change the way that you behave. You are being controlled by that, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So all these people who say to you, well, I'm really proud to be a cisgender, white, heterosexual male. You had so little to do with that, motherfucker. Just like calm down.
You're just looking for extra labels.
Yeah, and
that's it.
And nobody's interested in it. It's boring. It's really dull.
Yeah.
So, okay, moving on swiftly from that.
Yes, sir.
There are a couple of things on the agenda that I wanted to get to this morning, but let's talk about you for a second, because I love that you are bringing me Candace Owens updates, because I haven't been watching a lot of her stuff lately. I kind of fell off the wagon when, bless her, she's like saying Brigitte Macron is a man, and
I don't know. I still don't understand why you won't believe. I mean, she presented the case to me. Like, if I was a judge, I would be like, okay, look, Brigitte Macron, can you please produce any form of evidence to prove this woman's wrong?
Pull your pants down.
Yeah, just pull your pants down. I mean, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's
okay. Anyway,
it's not that hard to disprove.
So I've kind of fallen off the Candace wagon, but tell me what I'm missing.
So yesterday, well, she restarted her own channel after her separation with the Daily Wire, which is great. So she's back. So yesterday she was talking about the religion of trust the science. And she's decided to leave that religion because she is fully Catholic now, and she's not going to step in toe as far as following the science is concerned. So she brought up the fact that a couple of women had developed ovarian cysts. They had to get surgery, they'd get infections, they were in hospital for weeks and weeks and weeks, and ended up with being infertile as a result of the IUD. And the science said it's perfectly safe to put a foreign object in your body for years and years and years with no side effects. So that's one of the reasons she brought it up.
So she's saying that science is a religion?
She's saying that it's a constantly moving and evolving thing, and you can't just trust it at first glance. Okay. She actually played this clip of Andrew Tate, who's like, you can't bullshit me because I've just been around. I know how to use my mind. I've been around. I'm not just going to let you inject me with vaccines and all of this.
Can you imagine that the child that would be born if Andrew Tate and Candace Owens had a kid? It'd be like the most skeptical creature that ever walked the earth.
Yeah.
Listen, the science has come under a lot of criticism because obviously we were lied to and misled so much during COVID by people who were supposedly experts, right? And so people are justifiably a little skeptical, maybe a lot skeptical. And I would take the point of view of people who seem able to string sentences together fairly well and argue with passion. And that's something that you could say about Candace, you could say it about Andrew Tate, you could say it about a lot of people in the media. I would take those things seriously, but I would not just follow them blindly either.
Yeah.
And too often, like, I see people willing to throw the baby out of the bathwater. So you can't now suddenly start questioning things like gravity, which is,
come on,
and you don't believe in it?
No, you shouldn't.
Doesn't matter if you don't believe in it, because it happens. You can jump out of a high building and you will not go up, you will go down.
Yeah.
We don't need to constantly question the fundamentals of the physical nature and the environment that we live in.
Yeah.
We don't need to be like these conspiracy theorists who go back to first principles where we don't have to. I mean, it is a fact that time moves forward, right? It is a fact that gravity pulls things towards the center of the earth.
Yeah.
It is a fact that there are positive and negative charges that produce most of the chemistry, both in our bodies and outside of our bodies. That we know what hot is, we know what cold is. We don't have to start going back and reevaluating all of these things because they might be untrue. And if there are people who are doing that, they're probably the ones you should listen to anyway at the absolute pinnacle of science, and a lot of it is theoretical.
Yeah.
But in our experience as human beings, a lot of this stuff is now in the logbook, and we operate based on the fact that those are facts.
Yeah, in fact.
So I mean, it's hard to draw this line because people like Candace Owens, again, God bless her, she does say some very, very interesting and insightful things, and I'm not going to disregard her as a nutcase, which is the tendency a lot of people have. But she makes a couple of good points, and she makes some absolutely stupid points.
Just like most human beings.
Right.
So I'm all right with it. I think the best way to deal with people that are into conspiracy theories and whatnot is how Joe Rogan, Eric Weinstein, and Terrence Howard sat down for a chat. I think that's the best way to get through it.
Imagine that.
They actually did it. It's a 4-hour-long podcast. I got through about 30 minutes of it before my head nearly exploded. So I think it'll be interesting. Like, I'm gonna take the time to watch that podcast, because I think it's fantastic when we see multiple displays of people who don't see things the same way still be respectful with one another and get their points across. So, you know, what Candace was talking about as far as not trusting the science or whatnot, I think a touch of skepticism is good for everybody. I didn't completely agree with all that she said, but, you know, I'm a fan. I'm not sure if I can be impartial when it comes to her.
All right.
Love her.
Cool. I don't know if you've been watching what's been happening in France. That's quite interesting too. Yeah. Marine Le Pen is out in front, and Emmanuel Macron is the leader of the third largest party now. So he has had an absolute fall from grace, which is clearly the French people saying, enough of you. You're out. He's now trying to get into bed with the second biggest party, which is the communists. Good luck with that, because that will just mean you piss the French people off even more, and they'll vote even harder for even more right-wing parties. And by the way, I see people, I mentioned this on Twitter last night, I see every other media organization, I see lots of reporters, supposedly well-known and well-placed people in the media saying the far-right party of Marine Le Pen. You know, they're about as far right as, I mean, it's hard to even figure out what kind of metaphor to use here, because there hasn't been anything right of the center in France since Charles de Gaulle. I mean, we're talking almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's quite some time.
You know, I don't think that people completely understand just how tiny a step to the right this is. It's not a major leap to the right, and we're being sold a bill of goods here by people who just don't have a good frame of reference. Like, they don't know how to calibrate their own political point of view, and so everything to the right of them must be far right, and everything to the left of them must be far left. But there's an enormous space between far left and far right, and they're willing to just throw away everything up to them. You know, and this is happening among supposedly smart people in the media. So don't believe it. And frankly, if you see the term far right used to describe Marine Le Pen and you actually don't know anything about her policies, I'll tell you what you can do based on that information. You can unfollow whoever that media source is, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yep.
That's just a kind of a simplification, a way for you to make your morning a little more pleasant.
You know, I'm actually starting to wonder now, like, we're going to eventually turn into researchers, whether we like it or not. Like,
we all have to, right?
Like, there's not a single news outlet that you can trust will give you just the news without some sort of narrative in the background. It's madness.
So, I mean, Congo Chris says the pendulum is starting to swing. People aren't buying media bullshit, and they're far right dog whistling and fear mongering anymore. Absolutely.
There's that dog again.
I had an argument yesterday with a very well-known publication's chief editor in private, so I won't mention them because I don't think it's fair to do that. But there was a story about an Afghan man who stabbed a bus driver in Sweden because the bus driver said, "Ticket, please."
And the guy didn't have his money.
"I'm going to stab you rather," because that's what someone from Afghanistan, which is a savage place filled with rocks and war and hate, that's what he's used to in his country. You get asked for the ticket, you don't have the ticket, you have to stab someone because it's the only way you get off the bus.
Madness.
Right? And in Sweden, they don't really like that. So, I mean, I'm only laughing because it's such an outrageous clash of cultures, not because I think it's funny that someone was stabbed. Anyway, I posted the story. Turns out the story is true, but that the media business that reported on the story is, in the words of this editor, suspect. So it doesn't bother him that a person was stabbed in Sweden by an immigrant who doesn't know that you pay for things and you don't get things for free. And if you can't get them for free, you don't stab people.
No.
Okay, he's not bothered about that. He's bothered about the reputation of the news organization that reported this story. That bothers him more. So you see, it's all just completely designed to spoil any trust we have in the media. I mean, here I am talking to a person who in this country is in charge of a major publication, and this is what bothers him? Is like, that's not a credible news organization. Not the story. Not that it's true. That comes in like third or fourth in his list of priorities. So it's no wonder we don't trust them anymore.
Yeah.
I had an interview yesterday with Alec Hogg from Biz News, who interviewed me about the changes in the media, the changes in politics in this country, a whole bunch of other stuff. Had a really nice conversation with Alec. And he asked, who are the mainstream media now? Because they don't have the credibility that they had once more. People aren't following them in the way that they used to, the legacy publications and outlets and media corporations. No one believes them anymore. So where do you go? Well, you follow Jack McClunty, for example.
Yeah.
Because you know what? You've heard enough of his point of view to believe that he is a trusted source. And if he gets it wrong occasionally, you'll forgive him because he's not out there telling everybody that if you don't believe him, you must be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And the same goes for people like Candace Owens, frankly, Andrew Tate.
Yep.
Here's Morgan.
There's a whole
so many
list.
all over the world that I follow
list.
on a day-to-day basis that, if you're here watching us, it's because you trust us, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or you find us hilarious. Or you think we're so untrustworthy that we're hilarious.
Yeah.
But whatever your reason is, we're glad to have you on board.
Yes, sir.
Keep it coming. We'll keep doing what we do for you. That was kind of the basis of what I talked to Alec Hogg about yesterday. I see here, Percy says, Joe Rogan, Terrence Howard, Eric Weinstein, 3.4 million views in 24 hours.
I am not surprised.
That's who people are listening to.
Yes,
that's
sir.
who people are paying attention to, not the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all these other publications that have proven that they can't be trusted.
Yeah. And I mean, they did it to themselves. Let's not sit here and act like society just decided, you know what, we're not going to watch the news anymore. We're not going to read newspaper. No. These guys did it themselves. Like, you steadily pushed us out of your circle of influence.
Yeah, you can't now complain.
You can't.
If you're if you're running a media business and you're now upset that no one's taking you seriously anymore, but you've done this to yourself. Cry me a river.
Hey.
Maki Mumalo says, you follow Tucker Carlson? I do. He did the most amazing thing in Australia.
In Australia, that was amazing.
You watch it?
Yes.
So if you haven't seen it, you can look it up after we're done with the show this morning and kind of have it going in the background, because he spoke for like an hour or three.
Yeah.
It was a long time, answered a bunch of questions. And a journalist, again, in inverted commas, from an inverted commas serious publication.
She's not a journalist.
Asked him about, guns, gun control, gun violence, tried to tie him in and blame him for a shooting incident that happened in Australia 2 years ago. And he's like, how dare you? He's like, I thought you were maybe pretending to be stupid, but now I realize you really are. And this is what is being discovered day by day. And I see lots of people here saying, Nikki, for example, don't trust anything mainstream media. They're liars and puppets, and they're in the New World Order. Okay, I don't know a New World Order, but the first part of what you say, I completely agree with.
Yeah.
I hear Gareth about following blindly, says Sanele. Andrew Tate's brother, Tristan, love what he's got to say most times. Could even say he's less diabolical than Andrew Tate, but the guy thinks there's a genocide in South Africa.
Hey man, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Like, I mean, it's about looking at what is in front of you and being present enough to understand what is the truth and what isn't. Like that question that woman asked Tucker, it was loaded from
Yeah.
The moment she opened her mouth,
she had an agenda.
She had an agenda. She was like, okay,
Yeah,
look,
right.
I'm going to prove that this guy's actually racist. Meanwhile, she was the racist one in the room. I was like, oh, man. And if we need to, I am not surprised that people don't follow these so-called journalists or these publications.
No.
Because it is infuriating, because you're sitting there trying to figure out exactly what happened. In the meantime, you're told about race or the gender, whatever, and they throw all of these weird narratives into the story. And it's like, guys, just remove all the fat. Let's just get straight to it.
Jared says in the comments, let's just be clear, no one is watching Joe Rogan for news. They're watching him for crazy Terrence Howard and washed out comedians.
Okay.
Maybe. But where do you go for news, Jared? Tell us what because it's often, I mean, like, it's interesting. It tells you a little bit about someone when they tell you who their sources are in news. I mean, let's just look at this Joe Biden situation post the debate, which was such a disaster. Like we did, last week when we did this show, the debate hadn't happened yet, and we haven't really discussed it. But I don't want to go into like how old Joe Biden was or how forgetful or how useless and how badly he lost the debate by. What I want to talk about is the fact that if he is as bad as we all saw him to be, and as many of us have been saying for years.
It's been at least 3 years.
Okay. We've been saying that for years, and everybody's like, no, it's not that bad. People in the media, Joe Scarborough saying just the other day, oh, Joe is as sharp as a tack. He can basically do flick flacks. He can solve algebraic equations. And he's so wide awake and so sharp and so brilliant that he's more than capable of solving all the world's problems in his sleep. Right? It's more or less, I'm paraphrasing naturally, but that's what he was saying just the other day. These guys have been lying. Now, part of what you see in the wake of this, and it has to do with this media discussion we're having now, is suddenly you see a whole lot of these media people saying, wow, Joe's really out of it. We need to replace him. He's a bad candidate and he can't be president anymore. But they're the ones who've been telling us everything's okay for the last while. So they've been part of the lie. What they're trying to do now is show you, oh, no, we're still credible. We've been lying to you, but look, we're still credible. You could believe us. We're trustworthy. We've done nothing but lie to you, but we weren't in on that. Because now, of course, they can't lie anymore. We all saw what we saw on Thursday last week. We all witnessed firsthand, without any need for a filter or a media person to explain this to us, how the president, the man in the office of president of the United States right now, is a cadaver and who has no lucid thoughts going in one ear and out the other. He is a complete senile bag of hammers at the moment.
Yeah, and he wants to tackle what did he say right at the end when Trump was like, I don't even know what you were trying to say.
Oh,
he was talking about
who knows?
Tackling Medicare or something like
who
that.
Knows? The fact is, these media people have been part of the lie.
Yep.
So now we don't believe them anymore. And they can't go back now and try to reclaim credibility that they have permanently lost. So when they talk now about how, Joe Biden's clearly, he's and they were all having a meltdown.
Yeah.
On Friday morning here. Thursday night.
Was a
disaster.
Oh, I laughed my head off.
You know what? It's like what we've been saying for the longest time. So it is an I told you so moment. But if I were an American, the thing that would worry me the most is that we've had this person as a patsy in the Oval Office for at least 3 years, where he hasn't made the decisions.
No,
he hasn't been in charge. So who is? So Americans have had, for all their talk of insurrections and defending democracy, the Democrats better answer who's actually been running the government, who's actually had the nuclear football at their disposal, who's actually been making policy, who's been deciding this is how we'll respond here, that's how we'll respond. It's clearly not Joe. So for the last, let's be generous, at least the last 2 years, there are other unelected people who the American people do not know the names and faces of, who have been running the government. That should scare the bejesus out of everybody.
Yep.
Because the most powerful country in the world, and they still are by a long way, has been run by people who none of us can name. We don't know, and neither does Putin or Xi or Rishi Sunak, they don't know who they're dealing with because they sit with Joe Biden, but that's like addressing the monkey instead of the organ grinder. And again, this is not a reference to monkeys for those people who are stupid enough not to know a figure of speech, right? They've been talking to the monkey instead of the organ grinder.
Yep.
Guys, this would, if you're an American and this doesn't bother you, that the commander-in-chief of the military, forget all the other things he has to do, the guy who issues direct orders to the chiefs of staff in the military, and who is the ultimate arbiter of what American foreign policy should be, where wars are started and ended. And by the way, this guy started 2 wars. So if it wasn't him, who was the person who pressed go on 2 wars? Who?
Hey, it could look, I've heard a couple of ramblings that, Barack Obama is somewhere there in the background doing things.
Well, then he's having a 3rd and 4th term, which he shouldn't have.
He shouldn't. And for whatever reason, as you said, we need to place the blame firmly at the Democratic Party's feet to say, why did you guys think this was a good idea to start with? And honestly, why would you put that man out there to run for a 2nd term, whereas everyone
because you know what, they thought they could keep hoodwinking us and gaslighting us, and that the people of the world are so dumb, and especially Americans are so dumb. We could just paper over the cracks here. We'll keep this man weekend at Bernie's propped up, and the unelected people who've been running things anyway for the last 3 years, we'll just carry on doing that. Don't worry about it,
Madness.
Yeah. Madness. So a couple of comments here that I think are quite useful to take in. Jethro says, I tried watching CNN, Sky News, BBC News yesterday. Every single channel's pumping out climate disasters nonstop. Wildfires, flooding, heat waves, hurricanes, droughts. It's so obviously a narrative. Yeah, we're not buying that anymore either.
Yeah.
Bjorn Lomborg. That's all I'll say to you. Just go, if you want to find someone who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to climate and the hoax that is being perpetuated in the mainstream media about how the world's going to end by September. Nonsense.
Come on.
Read more.
Yes,
Inform yourself, and don't panic. The media is in the business of panicking. I've just had enough. Here are a couple of things that you need to know this morning, right? We are always going to have an effect on the climate. Nobody is dumb enough to deny that. We're pumping all kinds of shit into the atmosphere. We're polluting our rivers. This country is a trash heap, like we said earlier, because we don't tidy up after ourselves. Everywhere looks like a dump. We know that we have an effect on the climate. But the climate is going to autocorrect in this way or that way because it's not all up to us. We can have an effect, and we are, and it's probably a detrimental effect. But the planet will be here even if we go extinct, and it'll sort itself out.
I think that's more likely, that we go extinct before anything happens to this planet.
And Jack, the cycles that are going on are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of year-old cycles.
Yeah.
Of cold and hot.
Yep.
And carbon dioxide up and carbon dioxide down. And
we've had ice ages.
None of these people like Greta Thunberg, because she's not an expert in any way, shape, or form, can tell you any detail here. I say again, go and read Bjorn Lomborg. He's not running for office. He's not trying to convince anyone. He's accumulated some amazing evidence, which is worth, just Google him, and you'll find incredible stuff that will help you recalibrate, just like the people who don't know far right from
far left
center. It'll help you recalibrate the world, so you don't lie there in bed at night going, oh my God, the world's going to end.
Yep.
And setting your fight or flight mechanism off every 5 minutes. Don't believe this stuff. And don't believe that there was an insurrection on January the 6th, when the real insurrection appears to be installing an old man as a puppet while some unelected people are running things and starting wars without the consent of the American people. I think that's a bigger problem.
It is much, much, much bigger. And it's not lost on me that the people that are pushing this whole climate change narrative have got beach houses.
Oh, by the way, we've got a poll up at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
We'll come back, but you're exactly right.
Like if climate change was actually a real thing.
Right.
Leo DiCaprio, why do you have a beach house?
And by the way, in Malibu, which is like right on the beach.
It's like, why would you do that? Why would you? Wouldn't that be counterproductive?
In a state where there's the San Andreas Fault and they've been promising an earthquake that will basically split the whole state of California since I was a kid. Okay, so
they even made a movie out of it.
Oh, yeah. A couple of really bad B-grade movies,
too. Yeah. And here we are, still waiting, still.
Louis says, in response to your poll, I get my news from all those sources and do some of my own research. If I'm interested enough, then I will end up making my own conclusions based on all the info available, which is the best you can do, right?
Yep.
Lito says, check out the interview between Tucker Carlson and Bukele of El Salvador.
That's
I will, because I find there are two leaders in the world that I'm really, really interested in right now that are new. The one being Milei in Argentina, the other one being Bukele in El Salvador. I mean, these guys are just not your standard garden variety presidents.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's the tail is not wagging the dog.
Yeah. I'd like to see what happens. Percy says Gareth's starting to believe. It's not that I'm starting to believe or that I was right all along or that you were right all along or any of that stuff. It's just what I'm struggling to deal with is that there are still people who think they can bullshit us. In an age of the, we have the internet, guys. Like, this stuff might have worked when the Manchurian Candidate was a possibility.
Yeah.
And everyone who said, oh, Joe Biden is senile, all those people now are like, duh, look, we told you.
We've seen old men before.
But they thought they thought they could bullshit us. And for a while they did. A lot of dumb people were carried along.
Yeah.
So Pumlani says, I'm more worried about the Yellowstone supervolcano than I'm about global warming. And there's another one that they've made some bad B-grade movies about, right?
I love it.
They did tell us, I remember Al Gore's Inconvenient
Truth, yeah.
He told us that by now the whole of Florida would be underwater. I mean, Miami was just a thing of the past.
Yes.
Venice would be finished. The Maldives are supposed to have gone by now as well, according to that documentary. Go watch it. I mean, it's like, it is basic fear. It's like, we're going to make you afraid.
Yep.
And you don't have to be afraid. I've said it a million times. This is the best time to be alive. Please believe me that your problems, as horrible as they may be this morning, there's a positive spin on this. So just stick with me, all right? As bad as things might be for you this morning, you've had a huge argument with your husband or wife. You feel like death because you've got the swine flu. Your bank account is empty. Whatever is going on in your life, please believe me that you have a better life now than a king did 400 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just it's the small things, like being able to wash your genitals under running warm water. Okay?
Damn it, you couldn't take a shower. They couldn't do that 50 years ago. If you took a shower.
Mapello says, trust the blacks to keep our species going. Well, yes. I mean, thank God in Africa, we still have a positive birth rate.
Yeah.
So yes, the blacks. Right?
Now all we need is Dr. Umar Johnson in the background saying, that's where life began in the first place. It's like, shut up.
My favorite, says Bitcoin Boot, was Bukele gathering all his ministers and telling them in public they're all being investigated for corruption.
Now that is a leader.
I love that.
That is an actual leader. Not someone parading around trying to get people to like him or, call him a messiah or whatever. He's just doing his job. And it's so insane to me that we have to now champion competence. Because seemingly we've been lied to so much. We've been misled so much. We've been told the things that we're looking at aren't the things that we're looking at, that someone just doing their job makes world news. It's crazy.
I saw a really interesting clip the other day. I think I might have mentioned it on Friday's show of an American football wife who basically admitted during an interview that she'd manipulated her husband. I think you know the story, right? And the point that I took from that, and it's a valuable thing in this discussion too, I think. Feel free, and by the way, the comment section is always rife with disagreement.
Yeah.
So bring it on, hey. If you're not a subscriber and you don't already watch us on YouTube, that's the best place to drop a comment. Let us know what's on your mind. You might completely disagree with me. You might think Jack and I are full of shit and that we've eaten our socks, or we're smoking something very strong first thing in the morning on a Wednesday. But bring it. I mean, like, we want to hear from you. The one thing we don't want to do is cancel anybody and stop them from having an opinion, even if it's an opinion which we think is stupid. But that woman who went on and spoke about manipulating her husband, people really don't like being manipulated. And they really don't like it when they find out that you have been trying to manipulate them. If you want to take someone who likes you or could like you and immediately turn them against you, manipulate them and let them find out you're manipulating them. You take a huge risk there. And this goes for relationships, it goes for business, it goes for media, it goes for news, it goes for all of that stuff. If people find out that you've been trying to manipulate them, they don't just turn against you and dislike you. They hate you.
Yep.
They will hate you forever. And this is the price. Like, I'm going to say it so we can be absolutely clear about this. If you're going to manipulate someone and they catch you, they will hate you for the rest of your life.
As they should.
And they will never trust you again. So this is what we're seeing now, is the polls are showing in every single survey they've done in America, in Europe, in South Africa, in Russia, in China, in India, wherever people have been asked about the media, they say, by and large, they just don't trust them. They would rather follow the person with like 50 followers on X, you know?
Yep.
Because they could trust them.
Yep.
Once you break that trust, it's done. You're done for.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like I saw this quote many years ago that trust is like a mirror. Sure, you can fix it if it's broken, but you'll always see the cracks in that motherfucker.
That's a very
always.
Good, again, a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Like, great metaphor. Just make sure you know that we're not saying you are a mirror.
Yeah, or a broken one.
Got to explain this stuff to some of those guys in the EFF. Or else let them know that we understand it.
Here's the problem, Gareth. I don't have a dog in the fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, so here's some interesting news. Apparently, Jamie Foxx hasn't publicly disclosed what caused his hospitalization last year.
What the hell is that about?
Well, he's shared some details during an encounter that was captured on video. Apparently, he was hospitalized in 2023, for those who don't remember, for a health crisis. He was filming the Back in Action film in Atlanta. In a video posted to TikTok this week, he tells an unidentified group of people that he had a bad headache on April the 11th. He recalls asking his friend for an Advil, and then he was gone for 20 days. I don't remember anything, he said in the video recorded in Phoenix on June the 29th. That's just the other day. He went on to explain in the footage he was told his sister and his daughter took him to a doctor who gave him a cortisone shot. Another doctor told him something was going on up there, pointing to his head. I won't say it on camera, he said in the footage. The star is known to be guarded about his private life. He disappeared from the limelight at the time, and was then it was his daughter, Corinne Fox, who referred to it as a medical complication on social media. So it's all very mysterious.
It's so weird. Like this entire story is weird to me because Jamie fell ill and no one said what was going on. Like nobody. And I'm not like a celebrity headline chaser or anything like that. But if you're going to introduce a story to the public, why not find out all the information before you give it to us? Because I mean, saying that he's ill is like, okay, sure, he's ill. And then all of a sudden, a couple of months later, he's back on his feet and he's out and about and walking around and all of this. It's like
very weird.
At some point, there was the theory that he had been cloned, like it's not the real Jamie Foxx that we're looking at and all of this other shit. And it's like, guys, it's really simple. Whatever's wrong with the man, whatever he was hospitalized for, just tell us what it is and let us get over it. Now you've got this whole dog and pony show where we have to run around looking for clues and whatnot. It's like a scavenger hunt of some sort to try figure out what is wrong with Jamie Foxx. Let me tell you the truth. No one actually cares, right? So tell us the truth, or let's just move on from it. Honestly, I'm over it. I am genuinely over the story. It's like, what are we going to find out? Like he got some strange disease no one's heard of. But on the flip side of that coin, clearly you found the cure for it because he's fine now. So why should we care?
We're no closer to the truth. But I mean, there's also, frankly, his health problems are his health problems, and we don't really have any right to know what they are.
Sure.
But if he is going to share any of that stuff, it might help us to figure out what happened so that the rest of us can be,
you know what I mean,
clear of that. You know, I whatever it is, it scares the hell out of me that he was down and out for like 20 days and doesn't remember a thing. That's very weird. So, you know, just tell me it's a worm or a virus, or tell me it's something he took.
Yeah.
Then at least I know what the hell's going on.
Let's keep it pushing. And I think it's hilarious. It's hilarious that when he got ill, they had just released a movie called They Cloned Tyrone, and Jamie is in the movie.
Yeah. Right.
The timing was perfect.
Exactly.
It could possibly been a marketing plan. Who knows? I wouldn't put it past these Hollywood people. It could be.
Did you hear, just to quickly dip back into politics, because we only got 3 minutes before 7, but did you hear that the MK party asked Parliament to pay all the MPs' salaries into one account? All 58 MPs that they have seats for.
No.
Yeah, they made some application. Again, I don't know if this is true. It's what I read this morning on my way in here. 58 of them.
Okay.
But pay it all into one account, and then the party will decide what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
How's that, hey? Can you imagine? You just know you're never going to get that money if you work for anyone who's on the MK list. Just realize, like, you're not going to see any of that. If of course Parliament has refused, according to the story I read, which would be right. But just imagine they take in all that money, you'll never see it again. Right?
Gareth, kind of, who's that guy? There was a famous dude who had this major Ponzi scheme in the US. What's that guy? Bernie Madoff.
Yeah. So just again, for anyone who thinks MK is a right-wing party, I mean, this is about as left-wing as you get. This is socialism in practice. No, let the state take all your money and we'll just dish it out as we see fit. You know, can you imagine how
I
that
am
would
serious. Go? We were thinking people are walking around voting for Jacob Zuma, but it's Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. I say put it all in that pot and let's see what happens. Man. Do you know what?
Amazing.
All of the people that were worried about the MK party, it turns out they might just be self-poisoning at this point.
Sure.
All of us might just need to just sit back and watch from the outside, and they'll get rid of themselves. I love it.
Might be.
I love it.
And then I saw Bill Maher this morning, who's also having a bit of an awakening, despite being a bit of a lefty. And I've always liked Bill despite that. I've always thought he was smart and made an interesting point about so many things that I hadn't thought of. He says this morning on X, I see that it's Hunter Biden who's foremost in urging his father to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And when has he ever made a bad decision? Your coke-addled son who threw a firearm into a rubbish can at a school. And who made a child with a stripper and then refused to acknowledge the child, like a deadbeat dad as well. Add that to his list of really great qualities. Yeah, trust that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
He's the one to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't you trust the cokehead in your family? Don't you trust that guy who's sitting on the street, this Kotane with his nyaupe addiction? He's the one to trust, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Go ahead.
You need to treat them like kids. If you can hear them, you know exactly where they are. That's enough. It's fantastic. Fantastic.
So much of fun. Wow. We've turned over a lot of rocks this morning. It's only 7:00. We got a whole other hour coming at you. Among other things, we'll be talking to Nickolaus Bauer about his book, Great Johannesburg, What Happened? How to Save an African Economic Giant. So we'll find out what he's got to tell us about how he thinks we could fix this place. All of that and more on the way. Jack Motlanthe and I keeping you company all the way through the morning.
IQ Matrix LED headlamps. Ooh, I like those.
And they are brilliant because, first of all, I have astigmatism. So that means I don't get enough light into my retinas. So night driving for me can be a real headache. And if I didn't have those lights fitted, I would have had to take a shuttle. So what makes this special is that you can actually put your brights on, high beam full on, okay? And you're not going to dazzle a single person on the road because it illuminates what's going on around at the side of the road as well.
Yeah.
So if there's oncoming traffic approaching, it immediately dims some of those little LED lights. It disables some of them.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Spain. I'm going to back Spain for what I did to you guys last time. I've got them as 2-1. A lot of people in the studio are very happy that I said that. And it's also because Italy's got a leaky defense. So I think Spain is going to run around them. And France, look, I'm backing that French attack for that 3-1.
Okay, so if you are more adventurous than us, you can obviously bet on the Proteas. You can play in the Super 8s of the Cricket World Cup. We're not going to touch that business.
Yeah.
All right. It is Wednesday morning. We're already well into the month of July. Jack McClunt is with me. We are going through a bunch of things. First hour, we really we turned it all upside down. So if you missed any of that, you'll need to go back and take a listen, take a look. Otherwise, you'll be missing out. We shot arrows at just about everything we could.
Right from the hip, right here. Huh? Hey.
I like it.
It's amazing.
Okay. I broke the Hunter Biden news to my Biden-loving mother-in-law this week. It was fun to watch her face of disgust. Says Bitcoin Butch.
Oh, man.
So it's amazing that the Dems in America have immediately jumped to like, who can we replace Biden with? They're already, it doesn't bother them that their entire government has been a bullshit story for the last 3 years. They're like, let's just find someone who could beat Trump. Right?
Yeah, you see,
that's where their priorities lie. Power, not worrying about the country.
Yeah,
power.
The problem is they're trying to beat Trump instead of win the race, which is the problem. And correct me if I'm wrong. Did they not? Didn't Trump get arrested as a result of these Democratic people in the States?
Well, I don't know. It's almost like he's been listening to his advisors for the first time ever, and I don't think Trump's a very good listener.
No, he's not.
By any stretch of the imagination. I think he thinks he knows the answer to every question.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing he can do is just go to sleep and wake up on election day, and he'll win.
Yeah.
That's all he has to do.
He doesn't
matter who they
anymore,
matter who they put in. Doesn't matter what they do with poor old Joe. They wheel him off to a nursing home. It doesn't matter.
They might just fresh that loon from California. What's his name?
Oh, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah,
he's terrific. The guy who told everybody to stay indoors and not go to restaurants, and he shut down the beaches and said you can't go out and get fresh air and sunlight. Because it's very important that I go to the French Laundry restaurant with my friends in the middle of the lockdown and do whatever I like. It's amazing. Just great. JP says, for people who supposedly care about everything, they have no empathy. I think you're probably referring to the fact that we had to watch this old man suffer during the debate last week, which is very upsetting. I mean, my grandparents, to their enduring credit, did me the favor of dying before they could become a problem. Of course, I missed them. Would have been nice to have had them around. But to see that old man up there and to think that his family, and especially that grasping evil wife of his, that they're clinging on to him because he's their meal ticket, and that they're prepared to put him through the suffering in his old age, where he clearly doesn't know what the hell's going on. Half the time, it looks like he's seen an ice cream truck. And he's just distracted. And they want him to suffer because he's the mechanism through which they can continue to extort money from whatever nefarious business. I mean, he's got two brothers who've just never done anything except trade on his name. He's got a son who's a crackhead.
Degenerate.
He's got a daughter who's also a disaster zone. That whole family are just revolting. And the fact that they put this old man through this is a disgrace. If anyone did this in a family of someone that I knew to their grandparents, I'd be horrified. I'd want to report them to, some old people's charity or some state department that looks after this stuff. When you hear stories about like people in a nursing home that are being abused, you feel horrible. We don't want to treat our elders like that.
That's no way to treat our elders.
And yet they're putting him out there and forcing him to go through. Can you imagine the anguish in someone's mind when they don't know what's happening? They're not sure why things are going. Like they took him to Camp David for I think it was 7 or 8 days. Could even have been more. He didn't have to do any other work. He just this was his prep time. They prepared him, and you saw what you saw on Thursday. I mean, it must be just awful. It must be. He must have sat there going, "Just please leave me alone." Unbelievable.
Poor man. Just let sleeping dogs lie.
I get to vote tomorrow, says Jared, for who's going to fuck me over more by making every road in London a toll road. Ultra low emission zones, the biggest money grab the London mayor has ever thought of. Jared's in London, and I didn't realize that tomorrow's your mayoral vote. So who have you got on there? You've got what's the guy's name? He's been there for a little while now because it's Sadiq Khan. That's it. Sadiq Khan. Thank you very much, Nickolaus Bauer. Very well informed. Sadiq Khan is I think he's the front runner at this point. So good luck, Jared. I mean, listen, it'd be stupid to have a car in London because they will find any way. And by the way, they're not improving the climate or the environment or the atmosphere with their taxes. They're just taxing you.
Yeah, that's it.
That's all. It's just a way of getting your money into government coffers. That's all. They don't actually want to, imagine if they were planting more trees with that money, or if they were cleaning the subways, or they were, filtering the water in the Thames. I mean, that would be a thing, but they're not. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're just taking the money and using it for programs that nobody asked for.
Sometimes I feel like I could go back maybe 2 or 3 centuries when they'd propose a tax of 2%, and then we started a revolution.
Well, that happened. Let's not forget that's how America happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We should just go back.
They're going to tax tea. They were going to tax this, and a new nation was born as a result. And it was a small tax. It was like a little 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
And ever since then, we've just accepted that this is the way things must be.
The problem is people back then took shit seriously. You couldn't just. Again, I keep going back to this idea of the level of convenience we have in this world has made us so we're pushovers now.
Sorry, just got to say here. Dunks is quite right. It's not the mayoral election tomorrow, of course. It is the national election.
Oh, yeah.
Rishi versus Starmer. And it looks like Labour are going to win by a landslide. And you know what? Frankly, I never thought I'd say this, but they deserve to win because the Conservatives have been so absolutely shit.
Yeah.
They just don't stand for anything. Nobody knows what they stand for. They've been weak tea, to go back to our example of the Boston Tea Party just a little earlier on.
Yeah.
And frankly, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, who was the 14-day prime minister?
Yeah,
there's another one.
Yeah, it was some lady. She was there for like 2 weeks. Something like that.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Say it. Liz Truss. Thank you, Nicholas. There we go. Liz Truss. Remember, she was there just for a little while.
Yeah.
She basically watched the Queen die, and then was replaced about 10 days later.
They were looking for someone to do a quick cameo, and she put her hands up.
Yeah, it's going to be lots of fun. I mean, good luck to the UK. Frankly, again, I'd rather be here with our problems. I mean that.
True.
I would rather have our problems. It's just time they change that name. You can't call yourself Great Britain anymore. You just can't, guys. You have to go with what Matt Lucas and David Walliams said along the Little Britain. You are Little Britain now. You are not Great Britain.
Yeah,
and you're not allowed to use that title anymore. I'm terribly sorry, but things have changed and you have to move with the times.
Yeah.
You can't call a country what it isn't. And you are no longer Great Britain. So there we go. Sunak effed up the D-Day memorial. I mean, like, you had one job. What did he do there? Because I didn't notice anything that he done. He has a tiny suit, a very tight suit. Listen, he's you would expect him to at least have a good tailor. He's got tons of money, right? Couldn't do that.
Weirdly enough, the other day he made or at least when he announced
his wife is very rich. The two of them are very, very rich people.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, you were saying?
When he was making the announcement that they were going to go ahead with elections, I don't understand why he couldn't just do the announcement indoors. Like, it was raining and he's standing there with his suit. It's like, wait.
Oh, that was so sad. Wasn't that the saddest thing?
I was like, what's going on?
Is there a more British thing than to see the Prime Minister uncomfortable in the rain in a suit, looking sad?
It's like
standing there all morbid and grey, going, it's time for us to announce an election.
Oh, man.
It's just great.
I was like, so you couldn't go inside and grab an umbrella? Like, do they hate you that much that no one was willing to just stand there?
Shame.
And hold an umbrella so you could announce that you're about to go to
No, he
the
probably
polls?
didn't want to look like, that he had a servant. He didn't want to look like there was someone he was paid to hold an umbrella over him, because it would make him look like he was
Prime Minister for crying in a bucket, man. Of course, someone has to hold your umbrella.
Jack, everything is performative. Everything is performative. Haven't we seen this enough roll out all over the Western world? There's some interesting things that people are saying here too. I think this is quite cool. Apparently, where are you guys going to address the Israeli influence in the media and not call it a conspiracy theory? Unironic Sam. Okay, so in which country is the Israeli influence so profound? Please help me understand that. But like here in this country, find me one publication, except maybe the Jewish Report, that is
that is pro-Israel.
That is pro-Israel. I would be surprised if you can find one.
Yeah.
But okay, whatever.
You know what? Like, whenever Israel and Palestine is brought up, I genuinely reserve my comment, because that stuff has been happening for a very long time. And I'm not arrogant enough to assume that I can now show up in 2024 and say, hey, I've got the solution to a century-year-old problem.
Very respectable. Very respectable.
Like,
position.
I'm like, look, I don't want Israeli people dying. I don't want Palestinians dying. And if they can't
you're basically against bad things.
It's that simple.
That's your well thought through. You're against bad things. Great.
Look, don't shoot this one. You don't shoot that one.
Okay.
And if you can't live together,
it's like the president from Mars Attacks, Jack Nicholson, when they're going mac 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 and shooting everyone, and he goes, "Why can't we all just get along?" Right?
That's what I'm saying. put the guns down. There has to be a simple way of these two groups of people.
It's not going to be simple.
Yeah,
That I can promise you.
You know what I mean?
So, producer James has given me an update on our poll for this morning. Where do you get your news? Podcasts, 56%. I mean, obviously, there's a biased sample because you guys are listening to us. So, I'm going to have to say that this is about as scientific as, as scientific as the vaccines were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, podcasts, 56%. From X, 21%. Legacy outlets, 12%. Digital media, TikTok and Instagram, 9%. So, okay, that's the lineup. But I think a mix of those is probably about the most healthy thing you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple of comments that we want to get to quickly. Mortality is holding strong at 100%. Yes. You know what, Jack? Is that your world peace speech?
Yes, it is.
Wow. Okay.
Put the guns down.
Raven says that's great.
Let's pick up the beers.
You sound like a Miss World or a Miss South Africa or something.
Yeah, yeah. And look, people have built careers off of those little speeches. So watch this space. It could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Might just be the next big thing. Who knows?
All right. And Jared says that poll of ours is rubbish because it only allowed you to choose one option. Bad poll. Bad. Bad. See, this is the problem with polls too, is every one of them you can criticize on the basis that the sample's bad or whatever else. Let's get Nick here. I want to talk to him about his book because we live in Joburg.
Yes, sir.
And for many people, that's a reason for despair. So he's written Great Johannesburg, What Happened, How to Save an African Economic Giant. You may remember Nickolaus Bauer from TV. He was a reporter on ENCA for a long time. He's been in the news media. He's got a lot of insight, I think, to share with us this morning about how Johannesburg in particular has run. And by the way, he's also had quite a lot to do behind the scenes with how cities work. And we'll find out exactly where that's happened because that's less well known than his journalism career. So we're going to speak to him now, and I'm very pleased to have you in the studio. How are you?
Good morning, Gareth. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I'm very well. Very well. It's good to finally speak to you, man.
Yeah, and good to have you here in studio with us and on an issue that I think we all care about enormously. This is the place we live, right?
Yeah.
And you say here, we've got to save an African economic giant. They always say a world-class African city, but I don't think that's been used for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little bit improper to use that at this point in time, to put it as diplomatically as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no sugarcoating it, right? Johannesburg is in a very, very, very bad state.
Mm-hmm.
Politics not going to fix it.
No.
But what will fix it is Joburg's people. I had a lot of fun writing this book, Gareth. And I mean, the overarching point that I'm trying to make is that the gold's done. 40% of the world's gold got, in the history of the world, got mined in Johannesburg.
But it's pedile.
Yeah.
We don't have any more of that now. So it's time to move on.
It's gone. Even though the Zamazamas are trying to scrape out the last few
they're
bits.
digging like a honeycomb under this city.
Seriously.
So Nick, just before we get into any of that though, just tell us what you've been up to since we last saw you on TV, because that's informed a lot of why you decided to write this and what you've discovered in that journey. I mean, you never aren't a journalist if you start off as one, because you're always fact-finding and trying to see what's going on and trying to report on that stuff. But you've had an interesting career change since the TV news that most people would recognize you from.
Yeah, I worked as a journalist from 2008 until, full-time until sort of 2020, 21, up until the July riots, really. Got very, very, bad experience with those July riots. Anyway, I digress.
But I mean, that's an interesting point. And I mean, we're here to talk about you as much as we are your book.
Okay.
So I think it would probably interest a lot of people to know why that was the thing that tuned you out. Because we've been talking this morning about the state of the media and who people believe and who's objective and who you can trust and credibility and all that stuff. So I think it would be interesting to hear your point of view and your story there.
Well, after years and years of reporting the news and walking shoulder to shoulder with politicians as they try to address the country's issues, I got very, very jaded, really.
Despondent.
I reached despondency when the July riots rocked around. I mean, I covered them for a number of outlets.
Did you go to KZN?
No, I wasn't in KZN.
Gauteng.
I was in Gauteng, CBD. I remember I got stuck in one of the I mean, what would you call them? Not even protests. One of the anarchic scenes in Alexandra. And we were very lucky to get out, really. I mean, we were driving through the streets of Alexandra and we thought, okay, we're in the middle of this now. We can't actually get out. Let's just try and keep our cool. And we luckily got out. We eventually got some footage there. Then we made our way to Soweto. And I don't know. The thought that I had in my head was, where are we going with this? If I'm to play a positive role here, is it enough to just merely report the news? And it helped my decision when I got a very bad COVID from reporting on that, right? I can't remember which wave it was or whatever, but it was the middle of winter. We had a very, very young child. We all got very, very sick. And I thought, this is really... Yeah, it's not worth it anymore.
I mean, did you feel, was that maybe the most dangerous thing that happened to you during your career as a journalist? Because I'm sure you had a couple of brushes that you thought, this is not what I signed up for. And I think a lot of journalists, especially if they go into war zones and things, they know what's coming. But you don't want to put yourself in a position where you can't raise your child because you're dead, because you were covering a story so the rest of us could know what was happening at the Mall of Africa. You know?
Yeah, but you hit the nail on the head there, right? I used to get such a rush, and I used to be the first one. Like if there was some shit going down, I was running to where the action was, because that was exciting. It was, I don't know, it was, in your late 20s, it's like it's an absolute adrenaline rush. And a couple of things I remember, there was a massive protest in Johannesburg. We almost got fired on by the cops because we came around the corner to the police station that they were trying to burn down, and the cops sort of got into attack formation. And we drove around. It was driving a little jalopy for the Mail and Guardian, and I remember I screamed to the camera and photographer. I said, hang your equipment out of the window so that they know that we're journalists, and they luckily let us in. But I mean, I left in 2021 because I thought it was just not worth it anymore. Things change when you become a parent, and I eventually learned later in my 30s that good journalists are the ones that keep alive. Good journalists need to stay alive to tell the story.
Yeah, who would have thought it?
Simple things like that, right?
Who would have thought it? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's worth having, asked that question and having got that answer from you, because also people think it's easy. And that was a very scary moment for the country, not just for you. I'm not surprised that you made that decision. In fact, I applaud you for it. But I think so many of us at that stage, that was probably the lowest we've been. Maybe Marikana was another example of how low. Life Estemeni is another maybe. And then going back to like 94, I can't think of anything as bad as those three things I've just mentioned. And then obviously pre-94, there was a lot. But that's where you reassess things. Like, I don't want to do this. So what did you do after that?
So I was lucky enough that in 2012, I ended up going and doing a story on Ponty. That concrete toilet roll on the skyline. So anyway, long story short, man, I got sent there by Nick Dawes, who was the editor of the Mail and Guardian at the time. And he said, sex, drugs, prostitution, gangs, the scared old white lady that hasn't left the 50th floor, get all of that stuff. And, we went into Ponty with a safe word, Rod Stewart, actually. The camera lady at the time, photographer, Madeleine Crenier, I said, listen, if either one of us says Rod Stewart, just leg it back to the car. We went with a burner phone, all sorts of shit like that, right? Because we thought, this is really hell on earth.
Yeah.
So long story short, I didn't leave with that story. I left with a lease to stay. I wrote a completely different story. I lived in Ponty for 7 years, and I started a social enterprise called Lalanje that essentially, in a nutshell, we do two very simple things. We challenge perceptions of the inner city, and we provide opportunities for the youth there. And we do that by taking people on tours of Ponty and of Hillbrow, the surrounds.
Are you still in there now?
Yeah, look, I'm not directly involved. One of the original benefactors, a young guy that was there on day one, is now running it as a CEO, and I'm in the background as, I suppose, a chairperson.
Sure.
But we've taken 20,000 people.
Because people have this idea that Ponty is this nest of hell.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't. You're saying it's...
Well, no, look, I can't sugarcoat it either. There's some serious problems in Hillbrow.
I know at New Year they throw shit out of the windows.
Well, police, the sector commander at the Hillbrow police station has cracked down on that, and it's kind of like martial law on New Year's Eve nowadays in Hillbrow. The first one I covered 2011 going into 2012. I was in a Casper and fridge landed on top of it. Sorry, they call it an Inyala nowadays.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, that was hectic, but
Jesus.
But they really cracked down on it. But yeah, I mean, Ponte, I love the shitting dog stare that people do give us when we say that we take people on tours of not only that building, but the surrounds. But I mean, something has to have worked, because it's over 20,000 people since 2012 have taken the tour and come to the building and visited Lala and Jet.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
And then luckily, because I started that social enterprise, I sort of leaned back and just did a little bit more work for it. And then the opportunity came up to work in the multi-party government of Mpopalatsi in the city of Joburg. I just applied like anybody else.
Okay.
And I ended up working as a spokesperson in the Environmental and Infrastructure Services Department under MMC Michael's son.
But you lasted longer than Mpopalatsi, right?
Yeah.
No,
we talked about Liz Truss earlier, but she was like the Liz Truss of Johannesburg. She lasted just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into that many details. I touch on it in the book, but I'm also trying to...
Well, that was all politics.
Yeah, exactly. It is. But I mean, it was a great curtain raiser to what we're going to see now at a national level, because that shit is not easy, and it's not going to go smoothly, and it's going to be extremely messy. But what I do encourage all of our politicians to just come to grips with the facts that you guys are not doing it alone anymore. People are watching you. And I mean, in a way, I'm thankful that the MK has kind of got their act together and got John Hlophe as the parliamentary leader.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I mean, he may or may not be an evil man, right? But he is going to keep them on their toes.
Yeah, I'm not sure that saying it's a good thing that John Hlophe is part of the MK now.
Well,
I'm not.
let's just put it this way.
Strictly good.
Who would you prefer as the parliamentary leader? Dudu Zuma or John Hlophe?
Dudu Zuma's too busy with her phone. Well. She's too busy. But
that's like asking, how do you want to die, by gun or by knife? Like, the options aren't that great.
The question to ask is, what else could John Hlophe do? There are no other jobs that anyone would give him. So
No, true.
Maybe it's a kind of sheltered employment. Anyway, I mean, him burning in Tlemeza, Tom Moyani, we've got a real rogues gallery going on in the MK party at the moment. All right, so first comment that came in when you sat down is from Azalea. She says, Joburg is run by foreigners. Now, we know that Hillbrow in particular, Yeovil, is a shadow of what it once was.
Yeah.
And it does seem like the Wild West out there. And for someone who's not a massive fan of government, there's a part of that that's exciting. And there's something about anarchy, and it kind of finds its own level, and people survive and some thrive. And there's violence, and there's weird shit that goes down, and there's drug dealing, and there's foreigners, and there's Nigerians who control things, and people from Malawi and Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Zambia, and all over the place. There's interesting stuff happening. But you can tell us, having experienced this firsthand and taking people on tours and things there, and I'm sure you wouldn't take people there if you didn't think they would come back.
Of course.
You can only sign so many indemnities. What's really going on? And what would you say to someone like Azalea who says Joburg is run by foreigners?
Joburg is, to a certain extent, run by foreigners, but you also have to come to grips with the fact that Joburg was built on immigration. You can't go back further than 5th or 6th generation Joburger. Everybody's come from somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, the city's only 120 odd years old, and it wasn't founded on a river or a port. The only reason it exists is, you mentioned already, gold, right? And that reason is gone now.
Totally. And I mean, look, it's completely different, the current immigration status quo, as opposed to when Joburg first started, or even the 60s and 70s when, look, my father was one of these imports, right? He was an Austrian guy. And during the height of apartheid, they didn't want to develop black people, so they imported skills, right? And the point that I make in this book is that, okay, yes, there is a massive immigration problem at the moment in places like
illegal immigration.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Illegal
because
and
I don't think any country in the world wants to chase away people who are adding value and people who follow the rules, or broadly help the society improve.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who would is probably some kind of xenophobe. We've got a big problem with that in this country and in this city, right? Xenophobia is a really, really big issue in Johannesburg. I mean, Azalea is not necessarily being xenophobic by asking if Joburg's run by foreigners, but you must have seen with your own eyes quite a lot of not necessarily good behavior.
Horrific behavior, and also just absolute anarchy. But at the same time, what I have seen is ingenuity, innovation, and determination on a level I've never experienced in my life, right? Because the current status quo is This is the New York of Africa, really.
Yeah.
You know, people are arriving with absolutely nothing and building empires for themselves.
It's just, you know, like it's difficult to, again, speak in totalities of Joburg is completely run by foreigners, or foreigners are terrible people, or you get what I mean? Like,
You know,
it's such a melting pot. Joburg is genuinely a melting pot.
So Nick and I used to have huge disagreements on social media, and I always thought, oh, he's this left-wing lunatic. And I mean, you may still be, but what I absolutely know we'll agree on is that we love Joburg. I mean, I find, you just said the New York of Africa. I think that's such an apt description, because there's always something going on in Joburg. In the middle of the night, I mean, we talk about like during COVID, this place was pumping.
Yeah.
Nobody followed any rules. No one believed in any of that stuff. They just carried on because they had to survive. And Joburg is a place of hustlers. And that activity, while it is anarchic so much of the time, people are living. They're surviving. Obviously, there are some incidents. I don't know that the police really know what's going on. I think some neighborhoods have become impossible to raise a child in. And I'm sure that's probably one of the reasons you don't live in Ponty anymore.
Nail on the head,
right?
Gareth.
So obviously, we're going to agree on a lot of things. We'll disagree on quite a few of them. But Joburg, we're not trying to be pretty like Cape Town. Cape Town's like a supermodel. Doesn't have a lot going on in her head. She's not a serious person. I often say Cape Town makes a great mistress, but not a good wife. Joburg is like a good wife because there's always shit going down in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You think that's fair?
I think that is such an apt description of Joburg. And I use the phrase Johustleburg, right? Because this is hustle central, right?
It is.
And you don't go and make yourself in Cape Town. Or I think in any other city in South Africa, you'll struggle to make yourself in the way that you can make yourself in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And look, in spite of all the anarchy and things like illegal immigration and zamas, I think that there's sweet spots where the opportunity resides. With immigration, I mean, I think that there should be a massive crackdown on people that don't have the correct papers and documentation to be in the country. But
And what about the people who are living in buildings that really should be condemned? I mean, we saw that horrible fire that broke out last year.
Yeah.
And people who just illegally occupy things. I mean, I know that you're a lefty, but property rights actually do matter. And you know, the reason that we have more people in the black middle class by percentage and gross numbers that are black than white in the middle class proves that they also have those ambitions to not live in neighborhoods that are just completely disorderly, where you can't have children, where you can't raise those children properly, where you're worried all the time that your kids, something's going to happen to them. Your schools are no good, all of that stuff. It's about values to a large extent, right?
I believe so as well. And I mean, you know, labels are tough for me nowadays. I would regard myself as a lefty, but you know, some people have called me champagne socialist, closet capitalist, whatever.
Have you reformed some of those very utopian ideals that you and I used to argue about all the time?
I mean, everybody has a Damascus moment at one point or another in their lives. And look, I mean, I didn't get a chance to finish my point, and I'm sure that maybe some of my lefty supporters listening to this mean, God, cracked down on undocumented. Jesus, what's happened to him?
Yeah.
I believe there should be a crackdown on undocumented illegal immigration, right? But with a path to citizenship and a path to regularizing your stay alongside it. Because
I mean, we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought we could put those people on buses and send them away.
No,
Where are we going to
that's
send
not
them
going to happen.
I mean, wherever we've put illegal immigrants like that Lindela repatriation camp, it's a gross disaster and a blight on this country that we treat people like that, even if they've broken the law and come here illegally. We're not getting rid of them. So let's find a way to legalize them and make them useful to the society.
Yeah.
There we go. Bingo. Because therein lies the greatest opportunity for Johannesburg's turnaround. Embrace all the shit that scares you and all the things that you think are dragging the city down, and find the opportunity to benefit from it. I mean, Zama is another example, right? Hand those guys artisanal mining licenses and use the money that you get from the artisanal mining licenses to regularize that industry at a very, very grassroots level. And if possible, also use it to repair the environment after 140 years of mining. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit up in the air and lofty ambition, but I think it's possible. It really is. They're not going to go away. They're not.
No.
And I think that's the fear that a lot of people have, because seemingly we've kind of left people to their own devices. There's no checks and balances whatsoever. Like, I think top of the list when it comes, for me personally, as far as the conversation of foreign nationals is concerned, it's how we find you if something goes wrong. Like, if you are a part of the criminal element, I should be able to track you down. You know what I mean? And I think that's the apprehension that a lot of us have. That's why the ideas that you just brought up haven't crossed our minds at all, because, you know, Johannesburg is about staying alive,
it's survival,
and keeping the wolves at bay.
So I just want to go to some of these comments, because I made that offhand remark about Cape Town being this beautiful supermodel. But Joburg, says Tato, is a girl from around the way. Congo Chris says Joburg is the 6 out of 10 you got pregnant after a one-night stand. Kyle just says Joburg's cuck. I think he probably lives here. Luando says we forget every province has its own culture. Joburg just happens to be the province where money is the thing that matters.
Yeah.
Marco says, I don't understand why people dislike Cape Town. It's mind-blowing. Cape Town is an incredible place to live in. We're not attacking Cape Town, Marco. Don't do what Cape Townians do and get all defensive. We're just saying Joburg is different. In fact, I said you're a supermodel. That's a compliment.
It is.
Be happy with what you get here. I love getting off planes and saying fucking Cape Town just to see the Cape Townians, right? Joburg is the kitchen of the house party. The main event is in the lounge, but everyone always ends up having the best time in the kitchen, says Jared.
Yeah,
that's great.
That is great. That is great.
All right, so let's get to your book. Because you talk here about how to save an African economic giant. You mentioned the Zamazamas. Give us some other examples of what we could do to fix this place and to get it working. Because these are the things that hopefully, once we find out who our provincial government are, and Panyaza is allowed to pick the right people, hopefully, and Helen and you know, the DA get to choose their people, and then they can find mayors and all this stuff in the next election. Who do we start zeroing in on first? Is it illegal immigrants? Is it stimulating business? Is it cleaning the city up? Because one thing that really demoralizes me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, is the way it looks. It just looks like, we were saying at the beginning of the show this morning, like a trash heap. You can't have human dignity, which we're assured is one of the things we're entitled to according to the Constitution, if you live in a rubbish dump.
You're so right, Gareth. And I mean, I don't think that it's about targeting any one issue in particular.
Okay.
I think what it is about trying to look around yourself and see how you can make an impact in your immediate environment. Because one thing that I did learn about the trash, right? I once, you remember they did cycle, I forget the name of the thing, but they used to have great, huge, big cycle gatherings at different parts of the city. And they did one in Hillbrow once, right? And I met these cyclists when they came into the Olympic bar, which isn't really one of the dodgiest parts of Hillbrow, right? And I grabbed
yeah, I've been there. I have.
You know.
Okay.
And I grabbed a takeaway, right? And I'm waiting for these cyclists to come in, and they arrive, and I want to chuck away my polystyrene thing, right? And I speak to the vendor, hey, vendor, do you have a dustbin? And he grabs the polystyrene from me, and he chucks it in the corner, and I'm like,
oh God,
Jesus.
Yeah.
And I slowly but surely realized that if you don't take, it's not even just pride. If you don't feel comfortable in your environment enough to exist and be yourself, your Maslow's hierarchy of needs is not being fulfilled. You're like, I don't give a shit how this place looks. It treats me like absolute crap. So why should I care? So I think that it starts with trying to find a way to make an impact in your immediate environment. And I'll give you one example. Right? When I was working in the city of Joburg, copper cable theft is a major issue, right? And that's another thing that's just not going to be able to be addressed by authorities. What is going to help, though, is people in their own neighborhoods, on their own street, being proactive about issues like that or security issues. And I mean, look, I'm not saying round up a posse, see what weapons you can get and start kicking ass.
That's literally the picture that popped into my head.
And that is what probably, I mean, listen, you're only a couple of weapons short of that on a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
And there's some angry lady on that WhatsApp group who is more militant than someone who's wearing a uniform.
Yeah.
But people, I think, are doing this already. And we can see the signs. I mean, Pumi tells me on a Thursday often about her neighborhood and their WhatsApp group and how they've got people who haven't built on their property for the last 8 years, and then the whole neighborhood like gets onto this WhatsApp group and they come up with a plan and they act on it. And people are taking, because the government isn't and because the city isn't, they are taking more responsibility than they probably would in any developed country where everything was provided and on tap. And I think that's a good sign. There's an interesting point here that Zandi makes. She says in the comments, Joburg is revolting. That's her word. If it wasn't for money, I would live in the Lowveld or at the Wild Coast.
Man, so would I. That's an enticing place to live.
So why do people come to Joburg?
Well, you have to make yourself here. I mean, this is the economic epicenter of the country. Even though there is massive growth in places like Cape Town, there's a reverse Great Trek is what I'm calling it. People moving down to Cape Town. There's still a lot of opportunity here. I mean, there's a reason people are here. People choose to go to Johannesburg to make themselves because, I mean, deprivation and opportunity live joined at the hip in Johannesburg. And I think, the future of this place depends on whether or not the people want to take an active interest in keeping that ship going. Because I don't think the ship is quite sinking as of yet, but it is floundering,
There needs to be a culture shift in Joburg.
Yeah.
Like
I do think
on
so.
a day-to-day basis, like the people's, how we interact with one another and the city needs to change. Because as you said, all of us seemingly are here for our own development, and we want to make our money. And once we've made our money, we'll move to Mpumalanga where it's not so hectic, or the Wild Coast, as that comment suggested. Like, if we start treating Joburg as a place that we love and live in instead of an opportunity to enrich ourselves, perhaps that might change how we move forward.
Dato says, when Joburg is upset, you should try and sit down with her and understand why she's revolting. People are not taking this seriously.
I think that there's a grain of truth in that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Understand the challenges that we have, and the moment we begin to accept them, then we can address them. I think.
All right, so I mean, we're not going to solve all of Joburg's problems this morning, and I do encourage people to take a look at the book. I see your News 24 book of the month as well. Is that this month or last month?
This month, I do believe.
Nice.
I mean, look, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I do believe the publisher is owned by the same group.
Oh, well.
So it has helped.
It's got an inside putting you on the chart. That's fine. We don't mind. It's got the sticker on. That's all you need to know. What I would say, though, is that in the comments, too, there are a lot of people saying that the people in Joburg are a different kind. And I've been fortunate enough to go to the US. I like to compare South African and American cities, only because it's not a direct comparison, but there's a kind of a likeness between Johannesburg. Johannesburg is a bit of New York, bit of LA. It's like, we've got that crazy sprawling, highway riddled, traffic beset LA thing going on. We've also got that spirit that New York has of like, this is the place where you can make it, you could do anything. It's the economic hub of sub-Saharan Africa, all of that stuff. Pretoria is a bit like DC for the obvious reasons. Instead of cherry blossoms, we've got jacarandas. And there are good and bad things about that too. It's very cultural, lots of embassies, lots of that stuff. Pretoria is like a more civilized elder relative than Joburg.
Love Pretoria.
Joburg's like wild and parties and takes all the drugs. Cape Town is like San Francisco. It presents itself as being hugely progressive. It's got problems too. There's a lot of gang violence and dirty underbelly, but with the homeless people in San Francisco, Cape Town has exactly that comparison. But it's pretty and people like going there, and you can sit there and judge other people, which Cape Town does a lot of the time. And then there's like cities no one cares about, like PE, which is like Detroit, really. and we don't need to say any more than that. But I think this is a place that is just burgeoning. If we could get people, as Jack says, to have a culture change, to start taking pride in the fact that they have a piece of Joburg, I think it would be a huge thing. And we've spoken to the Free Market Foundation about this before, and to Leon Lowe when he was there and since then, about how people just should have title deeds for the property they're already in possession of. Like, some families have owned a plot in Alexandra, small as it may be, for 3 generations, and they don't have anything to prove that it's theirs. It beggars belief that, you know, you've got people talking about the land, all these politicians screaming about the land, but there are ways we can actually do this. If there's a government in Johannesburg in the next while and they do anything, this should be a priority of theirs. Don't you agree?
I do. And I think there's many things that Herman Mashaba got wrong when he was Johannesburg mayor, but he did hand out title deeds.
Yeah.
And again, this is when the closet capitalist in me comes out, because, you know, once you have a title...
I do think, sorry, Nick, I do think it's kind of important that people also exchange value for that. I think you don't just give someone, say them 50 Rand or 500 Rand or whatever, just so that, like, you've paid for it so it's worth something. Because that way, when you receive that thing, it's valuable.
Yeah.
And you can now borrow against it. And you can open up a little spaza shop or a little stall, or you can sell stuff on the street because it's your street.
I was saying the same thing about the taxi industry. I don't understand, till this day, I don't understand why those guys don't have a standardized salary every month, and we can, we'll know that they'll be on a set schedule, meaning when you get to the corner of Catherine and whatever, you know that the taxi will be there at 6:30 because they're all nationalized, and you know what I mean? These people can actually go open up bank accounts and maybe even get loans to start side hustles and all of this stuff. But all of these seemingly obvious things were just overlooked.
Yeah, there's a viper's nest if ever there was. Taxi industry, trying to formalize that is going to be nuts. But Gareth, I think you make an extremely important point in terms of value. Once we begin to value the things that we have and that we are experiencing Joburg, even though they are, combined with the degradation that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, I think we can begin to make a change. That point that I was making about the infrastructure theft, these sort of civil protection groups that formed in various regions of Joburg, those areas, the suburbs where they were operating, you could see the percentage of vandalism and theft of infrastructure was markedly low, like between 1/4 and 1/3. And I think that, once again, it starts with trying to find out what's going on in your part of Joburg. You're not going to be able to save the entire Joburg by yourself, but as one person, you can make an impact in your own way.
And I think we have to give credit where it's due to the banks who've kept the CBD alive, because they all have head offices there. And they've done a tremendous job of, by and large, trying to stem the tide of destruction and desolation that's been happening in parts of Joburg. There are parts that I'm sure you won't even go into. I'm sure there are parts that even the most hardcore gangster wouldn't go into. But I think they deserve some credit. I think those guys who've done so much of the inner city renewal, those guys who've helped try and fix Braamfontein and other parts of the near CBD, and have built out of ruins, really, places where people want to live, and established these little zones where you can have artists and you can have entertainment, you can have food and drink, and that's helped enormously. And the other thing is, and Mapello brings this up in the comments, he says, homeless people here in Musgrave, that's in Durban, have occupied every unoccupied building, including beautiful restaurants and bars. They don't just sleep and shit everywhere. They break down these places. I think what's happened too is that Durban has become worse than Joburg because it's been run into the absolute ground. And since the riots, nothing's got better. Floods, tornadoes, God knows what else. Like, Durban's become the ugly poster child for this is now your worst case scenario, not Joburg anymore. So we're like a little bit relieved. It's not us. Hey, don't look here. There's worse shit in Durban. You think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't visited Durban. Well, I visited last year, and I also took a look around, and I'm like, whoa, that has really fallen off a cliff. And I don't see a quick turnaround there by any stretch of the imagination. credit needs to be given to the corporates that are staying in the CBD. And I want to talk about Nando's. Nando's, I don't think is celebrated enough.
In Rosettenville.
Yeah, I started in Rosettenville in the 80s. Now 1,200 stores around the world.
Yeah.
Where's their HQ? The HQ is in Lawrenceville.
Central Kitchen.
Exactly. And I mean, it's also
I've been there for meetings too. I mean, everything around it is a slimy sewage dump, but that itself is lovely.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, next door is this place called Victoria Yards, and they are trying, right? They are trying. They haven't exactly drawn the amount of people in that maybe Maboneng did back in the day when it first started.
Yeah,
but they're trying, and you know, their co-founder Robbie Brosen is part of an initiative called Josie My Jersey.
Absolutely.
Something that hasn't been reported on is, you know, we heard the good part of the story about Anglo-American giving away their old offices to an entrepreneurial sort of grassroots education initiative. They wanted to leave that thing and leave it empty.
Really?
And people like Robbie Brosen went to them and said, don't you dare. Like, what message are you sending based on your history? You've taken all the gold. You've made yourselves fabulously rich.
Right.
And now when shit's hitting the fan in Joburg, you tuck tail and run to Rosebank and leave this cavity.
Robbie Brosen is an absolute champion, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. He's been a friend for a long time, and I think he's a friend to Joburg, more importantly than that. His work at Constitution Hill too has been tremendous. And I just love that we have people, you know, everybody thinks, oh, I can't make a difference. I'm just one person. But there Robbie is proving that he can actually move mountains.
Totally.
And by the way, when we talk about moving mountains, something you refer to in your book too is like the mine dumps have all gone because people are now trying to get that last little bit of gold out. And that's a good thing because that was poison and filth. And I mean, if people were living with, you know, if you drank the water that came off a mine dump, you would be dead in years.
Yeah.
A very short space of time.
Totally. I mean, those mine dumps, various studies have been done. I think it was a Northwest University one that found traces of uranium and all sorts of radioactive material. Yeah, I mean, once again, you know, it depends on how you look at that mine dump. Oh, an absolute eyesore, disgusting, whoa, Joburg is shit. Well, no, there's corporates, there's mining companies that are using new technology to reclaim the gold. Opportunity. Is there a way that I can maybe try and plug into that industry? Is there a way that I can try and find the opportunity in this eyesore that's, I mean, mine dump's not going to fix itself.
No, but you struggle now to see them. I mean, especially around like Soccer City, there used to be a lot more. Remember when they built it? Okay, then a good point that's being raised here by Raven and a whole lot of others is the drugs. Because Joburg, especially in those parts that we discussed already, Hillbrow, Yeovil, those kinds of areas, I mean, there's a lot of massive trouble there. We've got Nyaope all over the place to Flakka. People are talking about that. It's not good, right?
No. And, you know, a lot of the hijack buildings, it's absolute hell on earth in those ones.
Yeah.
You know, and the people that stay there are enabled to do that through the drugs. I mean, I would be hooked on heroin, Nyaope, you name it, in order to be able to survive in those things, right? And I mean, I think that that's really like I don't know. If we don't sort the drug problem out in Johannesburg and South Africa at large, or at least try and make a concerted effort to do so, it is going to engulf society. I mean, times are already tough, you know, and two things that always go up when times are tough are bottle stores and gambling halls, right? And drug dens. You know, I went to my old hood, Discovery. My grandmother also in Florida. And I went around there recently.
Was that your old hood?
Yeah, Discovery in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
We all have problems.
West Rand is actually,
the West
Rand. I like to call it the best Rand, not the West Rand.
Okay.
But Soti from the West Rand. I went through those areas and I'm like, Jesus. Florida is just a meth lab now.
Yeah.
You know, there's people living at the station. It's all overgrown. I went and I did a story when I was working for Newsroom Africa. And I mean, like,
if you ever want to see like racial harmony, just see how many white and black drug addicts are hanging out with each other.
You're 100%. It's a great equalizer.
It's an ugly thing, but like people always think everything is stratified on race in this country. It really isn't.
It really isn't.
And a great example of that is that when you're down and out and you're on Tik or whatever else, they all sit together.
Nothing screams racial harmony than, you know, a white and a black druggie
Shooting up together.
Yeah, I mean
Bluetoothing.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Scary stuff,
There's
man.
this informal settlement in Florida called they call it Jerusalem, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I was there 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Next to
You guys
to
go to all the
Zama
nice
Zama.
places. I'm so
listen,
jealous. You go to all the
it's-
places I
and
really want to go.
that should be the poster child for non-racialism, because you'll find every race
Yes.
in there.
Yeah, yeah.
In-
not, not in a
in-
good, not in a
Yeah.
good way, guys. Let's just move.
Sure,
let's
I
move
mean,
swiftly along.
it's not in a
Listen,
great
right.
way, but it's
What-
it's an example.
We joke going from drugs. We joke about the Nyaupe mayor. I mean, this guy from Al Jamal or whatever, who's our mayor. I don't even know. What's his name?
Yeah, I don't know.
Guamanda.
Do you know anything about this guy? Does he even know anything about himself?
You know, context of Al Jamar, all right? It's run by a guy called Khanif Hendricks,
Mm.
who by and large I think is a decent guy. He's our deputy minister of social development. It's important to this story that we're talking about now because he allows anybody to join his party in order to make a political impact, all right? So
Okay.
he's not like a purist in terms of you will swear allegiance to they
Islam or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we don't want to implement Sharia law because not all of our members are
Oh, so they're
devout
not pro
Muslims.
Well, phew, that's the least you
Yeah.
could ask of someone if they don't want to implement Sharia law. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
But where
I
did
mean,
he
the
find
point-
this Guamanda guy?
Well, that's the point that I'm trying to make. Is like I don't actually know where this guy comes from, and I'm not too sure about his principles, his own personal policies about not only economics but also like socially
I think
speaking.
they pulled him out of like one of those Zama Zama tunnels.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Cleaned
don't
him
know
up
about
or
that, but I think it's an
He's our
absolute
mayor.
joke.
How did he become our mayor?
Political horse trading.
Yes.
But it's a shame that the guy is mayor. He has more bodyguards than his party has seats in the council, and it is a bit of a joke. I mean, like those two
Wow.
instances that I'm immediately thinking about the explosion. Never mind the fire, right?
What was that?
He rocked up, and then you're like, if this is the guy in charge, we are actually like,
A lot of shit.
you know. Do not put faith in those people as elected people. Try and make a difference in your own little corner now, because
Yeah, but
there's the proof that is not going to be the solution.
what happened? Is that street repaired yet, or is it still
No.
a fuck up?
No.
No,
Oh man.
it's
No.
not. Same with that building. I mean, that's not a Joburg thing, though. I mean, like the National Assembly.
No.
Why the
No,
hell
exactly.
on earth did the
Yeah, when they
Parliament building
burnt down
take
Parliament.
18 months to even just clear?
It's very bad.
Stupid.
It's because clearly these homeless drug addicts are running the place. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, it wasn't the guy who he apparently the one they tried to blame one guy for all of that.
Mm.
It made the moment I saw that story, I was like, yeah, this is cap. They're lying.
The mirror opposite of Robbie Brosen, but proving the same point is you can make Joburg better like Robbie does, or you could burn down Parliament like that homeless dude did.
Yeah.
You do make a difference.
Yeah.
Right? If we've come to anything after this this circuitous route, it is that we know that you make a difference no
Yes.
matter who you are.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you've written this book. I'm sorry to rush things to a close, but I see we're almost at 8:00. I think people should read it, especially if you live in Joburg and you care about the place. And I know we only scratched the surface here. Eskom, we could have talked about. Water, which I know is an issue at the moment. There are people currently sitting without water today. You got to fuss bait. That's like a South African thing, right? Just fuss bait.
Fuss bait and realize that if the change is going to happen, it unfortunately starts with you. And I mean, being an active citizen, we just voted. Sorry to break it to you. That's the very beginning.
Yep.
Who's your member of parliament? I mean, do you even know the people listening, right?
Please.
Find out.
Ugh, please. And
try
the other people that you can't rely on are these NGOs. No, seriously. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many NGOs that are involved in things that do absolutely no good.
A lot of these hijacked buildings are run by NGOs.
Well, look,
Or
I
at
mean,
least they're documented to have been
Well, they're the vehicle that,
the vehicle.
that
Yeah, there you
bad
go. That's
people
the
are
term.
using to do what they want to do. And mostly it's just chasing power, and there's a corruption element to it. And there's possibly they're involved in a lot of the criminal stuff too.
this is where our opinions diverge.
I knew there would be a moment, but you had to wait until 1
right
minute to
until
8.
8. Right?
Look, in a nutshell, Leyland J is not an NGO, but we operate like an NGO. And I believe we have a more positive impact than a negative one. There are NGOs that you kind of wonder, well, you're in it for that Section 18A certificate. You want that little tax break.
No.
By and large, I think NGOs are doing more of a good job than a bad job. Not to say that they have not been, if not hijacked, but taken advantage of by nefarious forces at times, right? I think there's a lot of inner city organizations that are trying to fight for the rights of the people that can't fight for themselves. Not to say that they're not open to be misdirected, Gareth.
Sure.
But no, I don't think that they're all a bunch of Looney Tune criminals.
Well, I hope you're right. We will have to end it there. I'm thrilled that you came to spend time with us this morning, and thank you for writing the book. It's called Great Johannesburg: What Happened? How to Save an African Economic Giant. And Nickolaus Bauer, our guest this morning. Thanks for coming in. Thanks Jack.
Gareth. Thank you, Jack.
Sheesh.
Anytime.
Busy day, hey? Great start to our Wednesday.
Very, very busy. I love it.
All right, so now time for some Naope. Cheers.